So I'm going to go ahead and introduce Sarah Banet-Weiser, who is the Dean of the Annenberg School of Communications and will be offering some welcoming remarks for this panel. Along with being Dean of Annenberg, Sarah is the author of numerous books on gender, media, and popular culture. And she has just let me know that one of her initiatives as Dean has been to plan a transnational transgender studies conference for the fall. So keep that on your radar with more news forthcoming. So thank you for being here, Sarah.
Hi, everyone. How y'all doing? Good, good. Thanks for that introduction. Thanks for inviting me to be here. I have only been at Penn for a very short time. I've only been dean since August. It's been a very calm and easy year to be dean at Penn or in the world. So forgive me if I look very, very tired. I want to just say something about GSWS as a way to welcome our panel. One of the first things that happened almost as soon as I was hired here was that Melissa sent me an email and asked if I wanted to be part of GSWS, and I enthusiastically agreed, and I was really, really happy to see the kinds of work that has been done here and has been done for the last 50 years. So it's a really remarkable anniversary, and I think this is a very welcoming space at Penn. And again, in the midst of a time of conflict and war and grief, having a space where you feel nourished and you feel cherished and you feel supported feels like it's never been more important. So I'm really honored to give some remarks here. I'm just going to talk for a couple of minutes. I was thinking about this panel and looking at the bios and all the different things that everyone on this panel have been doing. And it reminded me of a couple of years ago, I was I don't know, at some academic event, and someone who knew me just a little bit, but knew my work was like, "Oh, Sarah, so how's the feminist business going?" And my response was, well, the world keeps giving us material, doesn't it? It's going, I mean, in that sense, it's not going well, but it certainly is busy. And it reminded me of the sort of wide-ranging ways that an education and a foundation in gender and women's studies offers us in terms of our careers, in terms of our career paths, our ambitions, what we want to do, with our lives. And so I'm super excited to hear from all of you about your time here, about how GSWS and other things at Penn provided a foundation for us to think about things like inclusivity and marginalization and social justice. So, again, 50 years is an amazing anniversary, and it's an incredible time to celebrate Penn's efforts and Penn's accomplishments in terms of gender equity, gender education, the different ways in which we are organized and are organizing in terms of gender. It's also clear, and I think we all know this, and we all know this in different ways and in differently painful ways, that we've got a lot of work to do. There's a lot of work that still needs to be done. With that, I'm going to hand it over to hear from some people who are doing this really important work. So thanks.
Thank you so much, Sarah. And I'll add that Annenberg was one of the most generous supporters of this event. So thank you also for that. I'll now go ahead and introduce our panel moderator, Lex Gilbert, who will take it from there. So Lex is a junior here at Penn studying communication at Annenberg and is in the Gender, Sexuality, and Women's Studies program. Lex works as a peer anti-violence counselor and has held several internship roles working in DEI. They are especially passionate about ending mass incarceration, promoting LGBTQ acceptance, and creating opportunities for underprivileged populations and cultivating disability justice. So thank you all for being here. Thank you, Lex, for moderating, and I will now get out of your way.
Thank you. So thank you everyone for being here today. Good afternoon. I hope everyone's doing well. I just had a lovely introduction, so I don't need to introduce myself at all, but I was hoping that our panelists could introduce themselves. Please start by sharing your name, pronouns, the year you graduated, and a brief description of your current job role.
Should I kick us off? Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is George Hardy. I am a class of 2012 graduate from Penn. Name, graduating year, and job. Okay. And currently I work for Deloitte Consulting, one of the big four management consulting and accounting firms, where I do diversity, equity, and inclusion strategy for major corporations. I've also done a stint in our social impact strategy arm where I've been able to work with nonprofits and foundations on various equity issues, ranging from recruiting and the talent life cycle to representation to just broader equity strategy.
Hello, I'm Serena Martinez, they, them. I graduated 9 months ago. Not sure how much I'll be able to provide on the panel, but I'm currently taking a year to take a break from school. I'm doing some art, painting, and then I will be heading to Columbia in the fall to get my MSW.
I'm loving hearing this stuff. I feel like I want to talk to everyone about something already. I'm Dawn Yuster, she, her. I graduated from the College of Arts and Science in 1998. I was a woman studies major. That's what it was called back then. I was also an Afro-American studies minor, which is what we know it was called back then. And I had a concentration in business in Wharton, which I'm told they may not do anymore, but I was very fortunate to have. And I am a civil rights lawyer. I have been practicing for 22 years. I live in New York City. I grew up in New York City. And I have practiced various different types of civil rights, from reproductive rights when I first started out at the ACLU. I almost wore my pink shirt with my body, and please do not touch it. But we're invaded in any way, and I will talk more about some other things later. But and to where I've evolved, indigent defense, public defense work I did, also representing poor people accused of crime, predominantly Black, Brown, and people with mental health and other challenges. And I do a lot of education advocacy now, working with children, young people. Particularly, I just started a new job, actually, so I will talk more about it later.
Hi, everyone. My name is Nadine Vassallo-Frohne, they, them. I graduated from College of Arts and Sciences in 2008. Took me a little while. I started in 2002. So I kind of, I was actually looking at my transcript to like remember some of the classes that I took when I was here. And it's so funny because actually midway through the abbreviation switches from WSTD to GSOC. So I was here for that switch from women's studies to gender and society. Since graduation, I've been working in the book industry, in publishing and book selling. I'm currently the vice president of operations for bookshop.org, which is a e-commerce website supporting independent bookstores, giving small bookshops a way to compete online against Amazon and to try to challenge their near monopoly level hold on our industry. I do a little bit of everything for bookshops, so HR, accounting, a lot of like internal policy stuff. but also work a bit with external partners and bookstores to help them make the most of our platform. And I think we have somebody on Zoom
Hannah?
to go next.
Yeah. Hey, everyone. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, awesome. Hi, pronouns are she, hers. Also, just want to say grateful for the opportunity to dial in virtually. I'm in month 2-ish of my parental leave, have a newborn, so really grateful to be here. Thanks for the option virtual. I'm currently a director at Dynamic, which is a healthcare consulting company. And shout out to George Hardy over at Deloitte. We're former colleagues in the DEI space as well. I was also, like Nadine, back when it was gender, culture, and society. It was a sexuality studies concentration, minor in Hispanic/Latinx studies as well. Really happy to be here and to learn more from the panel.
Awesome. Thank you everyone for introducing yourselves. I hope everyone has like a little bit of intro and we're able to kind of launch from there. So now that we've gotten that initial information, I would love to kind of go into questions. And my first one is, would everyone say that their experience as a Penn student would have been different if they had chosen a different major? And did anyone have different intentions as a first year, like, and then change your mind to become a GSWS major?
I guess I'll kick us off again.
After this one, I'll go the other way.
Okay, perfect. And I think I neglected to say my pronouns. My pronouns are he, him. I came into Penn with the intentions of being a child psychiatrist. So I wanted to major in something in the sciences. And oddly, I was just telling someone at work today this story. I had an advisor who actually said, she looked at my test scores and she's like, you don't need to take any math classes with your test scores getting into Penn. And so I was pretty discouraged, to say the least. But in my freshman year, I took courses in different things that I thought I would be interested in. So I took, at the time, it was GSOC. And so an intro to gender studies course, a cognitive science course, a psychology course. I was all over the place. And in my intro to gender studies course, I remember the professor, we had our first paper and she's like, George, I want to talk to you about your paper after class. And I had taken AP courses in high school. So I was like, oh, my paper must have been great. Like, she wants to talk to me about it. And she actually said to me, it was Shannon Lundeen, and she said, you know, you need to go to the writing center immediately. You have some work to do. And I think that type of investment in a professor was something that really stood out to me, and something that I personally will cherish for forever, for someone to see that, for someone to say, you need a little help and I'm going to support you through it. And I think had I not had that opportunity, I actually probably would have been on a much different path at Penn and may not have even been at Penn. And so I think just having that sort of experience, I think, was very core to the community that we had in this major and in this program. And so that was, I do think it would have been different had I not been a major.
People have been asking me a lot if I liked Penn, having recently graduated. And my answer has been that my experience with Penn was probably very different than their image of what Penn is like. Because I do feel like my experience with the GSWS department was very different, partially because it's just such a small department. I was able to do so many more things than even my peers that were doubling in gender studies and English were able to do because of the different sizes of those departments. So yes, I do think it was very different. Penn is a place of many different bubbles. And the gender studies bubble opens you up to a very different perspective of the campus than I think many of the other groups do.
Oh, you're bringing me back. So when I started at Penn, I came in through a different route than probably many people even know about. I was an older undergrad and I started at 24. I I graduated from Bronx Science when I was young, and I graduated on home instruction, which was incredibly unusual back then. I was struggling with mental health challenges in the 80s. And so I was a teenager. I graduated 17 and I was not ready for college. And I was actually in and out of hospitals for a while. And my parents were worried what was going to happen with me. And so was I. But over years, various different things happened. And I actually worked at a startup computer company in the Bay Area when I was in my early 20s that did not make it. It was so long ago. We had to explain that we were selling information. It was pretty funny. Like we had these kiosks, but we were ahead of our time, but we didn't know how to execute. But I love math and science. That is the bottom line. And so when I did go to Penn, my first year, I took math and science classes. I took psychology also, but I was all over the place also. I totally relate to that. And it was not working for me. My first, after that first year, during the summer, I just sort of had this epiphany of, let me just look at the course book, forget about the headings, forget about like what departments they're in or what anything is, just look at the classes, what inspires you, what talks to you. And to me, everything was interdisciplinary. And that's how my life has been. That's how my work has been. And I learned so much, and it really was the foundation of what I did at Penn, all sociology classes, women's studies, the African-American studies classes. I mean, and there was so many great teachers, English classes that were really important that overlapped in these issues, the intersectionality that I learned about before it was like, I guess, you know, with George Floyd's murder and everyone's talking about it. It was like, that was part of who I was, and partly because of, I think I so related to being marginalized and being oppressed in a definitely not as a, you know, I'm white, I have a lot of privileges, but as a person with mental health challenges and disability, and not knowing it, frankly, at the time, what I was experiencing, but knowing that it wasn't right and that I was being abused in different ways by the system that was supposed to help me, because it really was a hot mess in the 80s, I have to say. I mean, we didn't have any of the treatments that we have now. Not that they're all great now either, let me tell you. Even if you have privilege, there's still a lot of challenges. But in any event, it really set the stage for the work that I do now and who I am now. And I am incredibly grateful. And I just want to add one other thing and pass it on to Nadine, is that there was also one class that really shaped, I think, a lot of what I decided to do. And I wish I remember who the professor was. I couldn't see him, but the class was a sociology type class. And I just remember learning about Charles Hamilton Houston and the like lawyering and the social justice and you know, racial justice, you know, and before we were really talking about it fully that way. And I knew that I wanted to do something. I knew I would never ever be able to be like him. He's too extraordinary and you know, social engineer in terms of transforming how you know, access to education and civil rights movement. But I just knew that I wanted to do something like that. And I knew I wanted to go to law school. So it really shaped me. So I went straight to law school after that, which I was one of the few who did know what they wanted to do at that point.
Thank you. My gosh, everything that you all just shared resonates so strongly with me. When I came to Penn, I had no idea what I wanted to do. I think like I barely knew who I was, let alone what I should be studying. I was like 17 years old. I had a ton of unprocessed grief and trauma that I was just kind of like white knuckling my way through. And after 2 years of just kind of taking whatever looked interesting to me, that really caught up with me. And I had a semester where I failed all of my classes. And I got contacted by my academic advisor at the time, and it was suggested that I should go on a mental health leave to prevent myself from failing all my classes for a second time, at which point they had told me I would maybe not be allowed to continue at the college. So I did that. Many people in my life told me that if I took a leave, I would never go back and graduate from school, but I did. I took 2 years off, and then I returned, and I thought, this is going to sound a little crass, but I thought, you know, how can I graduate? I've got to get a major somehow out of this random bunch of classes I have passed. And so I looked through what I had taken, and I realized like there were some really common themes. I was taking a ton of stuff related to gender, a ton of stuff related to sexuality. Like I had fulfilled my science requirement with a human reproduction class. And all of those classes, because of the interdisciplinary nature of the program, were cross-listed in gender studies. So I figured, you know, this is where I should go. And it's really where I put my focus for the rest of the time that I was in school, and found a home there. I think without that, like I really struggled to adapt to like the academic environment in general. And I didn't come from like a family that was able to help me with that at all. So I think finding like such a welcoming group of people as you know, my professors and fellow students in the program at the time were, was really invaluable. And I think as far as like, I mean, how my experience would have been different if I didn't find that, I don't think I would have ever finished school. Like, I think it really was finding something that resonated with me and that felt welcoming, that made all the difference. And I think, you know, so many of the classes I took too involved like reading and exposure to language that I hadn't known existed to describe like the way that I felt in the world and the way that I saw the world. And I think that really like pushed me in the direction I've gone in my career to work with books, because I thought, you know, this the accessibility of information and language was so important to understanding you know, anything. So yeah, I think that's it.
Hannah.
Oh, okay. Hi, everyone again. So I love this question so much. I was thinking about when I was at Penn and I was really deciding what I was going to do. I loved all the courses. I think I really resonate with what you all have said, in that it just was a passion for it. But I almost double majored. I thought I wanted to do, at the time, there was this philosophy, politics, economics. And I told my academic advisor that I wanted to do that, and I thought double major. And you know, double majoring is great for some people, but for me, I was on the track team. I wanted to do different clubs and activities. And my academic advisor sort of asked me why I wanted to double major. And I think it was because I was a bit self-conscious of just fully being a gender studies major and thinking about jobs and how it would be perceived. And I think the experience of like actually being like, you know what, nope, I'm going to fully go into it. I'm going to stand alone on this major, and this is really what I'm passionate about, helped me, you know, be really clear in that I want to get the most out of my college experience, out of my work experience, and I should really be focusing on what I'm passionate about. And I think that decision really paid off. And, you know, it made my Penn experience so much more enjoyable to actually go to classes and prioritize my time with something and content I was passionate about.
Thank you all so much for those responses. I feel like a lot of people today also have those exact same experiences. Which, I mean, Serena, you're a recent grad, but I feel like we can definitely see themes across the years. So thank you all again for those responses. So some people kind of touched on this a little bit, but I wonder if everyone could share what their favorite experience was during their time in the GSWS program. This could be like a class you really loved, a GSWS event that got put on, or an interaction with a professor where you felt really empowered after you left, or anything else that comes to mind. And then we'll start the other direction. So Anna, you can go first.
Okay, sure. I had so many great classes that I loved. I mean, I see Professor Aslina on the call. I loved his folklore and sexuality class. I loved my Spike Lee film class. I love my Professor Sender, LGBT representation in the media. There were so many that I fully enjoyed, but my background picture is actually of Santiago Atitlan in Guatemala. As part of my gender studies major, I decided to do, my thesis on women, gender roles, domestic violence in Guatemala. And what I really loved about this major is that, you can really kind of pick and choose what you're passionate about. So Demi Kurse, when she was there, she was really so supportive of my interest, things that were multidisciplinary. And I definitely think that for 2 summers going to Guatemala, having the chance to do independent qualitative research was probably one of the most rewarding experiences for me academically and in my life.
It's funny, Anna just mentioned it because the first class that came to mind for me was Catherine Sunder's LGBT representation in popular media. I think that, I had a lot of classes that really stuck with me, but that class in particular and being exposed to some of the films that we saw, like the work of Marlon Riggs and Jenny Livingston, like seeing Paris is Burning for the first time, I felt like totally changed my world. So yeah, I think that.
Yes. Definitely. I love that class. Maybe we're in the same class together. Who knows?
So I talked about one class that was really impactful for me, and but that wasn't the only one. Definitely Demi. It's great to see you. Oh my goodness, it's amazing. And Demi was my advisor, my senior thesis advisor, and I also had a little bit of another advisor too, who I took his Afro-American studies classes at the time, Dr. Eric Perkins. And that was an amazing experience, the senior thesis experience. I was able to do some really practical research and tie it to both law, social policy, and it was, it definitely really shaped a lot of my thinking. And I feel like I just learned so really to embrace writing and reading much more than I think I was really afraid of it when I was younger. I didn't feel like I was good at it. Sometimes I still don't, but I think that's part of writing. You just always want to be better. But there was also Dr. Beaver, who I really loved, and he's still here. And then I have to say one other professor who wasn't here but is now, and was my favorite professor in law school at Northwestern, Professor Roberts, Dorothy Roberts. Incredible.
Several of my professors are watching me right now, so I'm going to avoid calling them out. They've also mostly been on these panels, so you all have heard of them and heard from them. Dr. Beetham allowed me to do this really creative thing where I was able to help co-write a syllabus for a class that is on its 2nd year running. And I was uniquely unqualified to do. I didn't even have my BA at the time. But it was a class that was pulled from student experience, and it was about sexual violence on a macro to micro level. And so I was able to bring some of my experience, having worked with communities on campus, into kind of a case study environment for the class. And it was really fantastic. I got to help write the class, help TA the class, and then write the syllabus so that it could continue on for the next few years. So again, that's something I wouldn't have been able to do in various other departments. Dr. Beetham just kind of reached out and asked me because I was spending so much time in her office working on my thesis. So it was really cool and really unique. And I personally don't know that many other people who were able to co-teach a class without a BA. So yeah, it was really fantastic to be able to do that.
I think I have a few favorite moments. Circling back to the initial story I said about failing my first paper, I think once again, when you have someone who's like just supporting you and pushing you along, I think that sort of gave me the confidence to perform and to kind of know that I had a place at Penn. So I think that was foundational. And so one of my favorite memories is failing that paper and still getting an A- in the course. And then I was like, well, if I did this, I can take her class again. So I took a course called The Science of Sex and Sexuality my junior year. And I was like, I'm gonna rock this course, and got an A plus. And so like that was something that I think really showed me, like, if you have the supports, if you have folks rooting for you in your corner, then you can do quite a bit. And I think broadly, just being a major in GSWS, I felt like I just had the chance to study myself. So my biggest memory, I guess, shout out to Demi again, for allowing us to just have the space to write a thesis. I studied like the intersections of Black masculinity, sexuality, and education, and really wanted to understand how or if factors around Black masculinity and sexuality influences the desires to achieve in academic settings. Um, I I grew up a kid from a low income background in Detroit, um, and always felt like I had to fight many things. And one of the things I often felt like I was saying was, I may be gay, but at least I'm smart. Um, and and that was pretty much what my thesis was about. So and so having the opportunity to explore that deeply was really meaningful.
Wow. Okay. Hard to follow that one, but I'll do my best. Those are all really awesome experiences. And I feel like that's such a unique experience at Penn where we all like have specific people that we can reflect on, even though, some of us have been away from GSWS or away from Philly for like quite some time. You can still remember the impact that the people here had on you. So I think that's really powerful and meaningful. So my next question is kind of on a different, a little different path, kind of moving into professionalism. Penn is really known for its pre-professional culture. And I don't know if that necessarily began when all of you were here. But if it did, I'm really curious if that expectation of professionalism affected your experience while you were studying here. And similarly, if any clubs or extracurriculars really stood out to you as either connected to the pre-professionalism or really moving against it. I'll give you guys a second to think about it, and then you can start whenever you're ready.
I'll start again.
Yeah, we're gonna go.
Okay, I didn't know if we start in the middle or.
We'll start in the middle next. How about that?
I think I'm also trying to be mindful of like my voice as a guy on the panel, so that's also why I'm asking, like, should I start? I do think the sort of pre-professional culture was there for sure. I think that's a really big deal with like Wharton in the background, right? And so, but I think, kind of circling back to what I said, I think once I found the confidence to study what I wanted to do, I just felt like, I could go whatever path I wanted to. So I actually, after graduating, I did Teach for America. So I started my career in education. And I think on campus, I knew that's what I wanted to do. I applied the first round, so I knew I had a job in like October or November of my senior year. But I do recall many of my classmates saying, George, what are you doing? Why are you taking this Penn degree to go into education? And had a lot of folks sort of questioning why I would spend so much money on a degree to go be a teacher. Um, but I felt like, having had this experience coming from Detroit, coming to Penn, that I knew I wanted to give back in some sort of way, and give back to my community. So I think just as long as I was focused on that, it didn't really matter. I also, knew that Teach for America was affiliated with so many other programs and grad programs, other companies that even taking that step for 2 years would still be able to set me up for something great. So I guess that was sort of my experience there.
When I said earlier that when people asked me about my experience at Penn, and I said that my experience is probably different than what they were perceiving Penn was like, I was mostly referring to Wharton. A lot of times people kind of imagine what my experience on this campus was like, and they think that I was in Greek life, or I was, I don't know, on a party bus up to New York every weekend. And alternatively, I was often protesting those groups on campus. So that's why I say that my experience was quite different. I also am privileged enough to have quite a cushion to be able to explore these things. I declared my major when I was a freshman. So people were telling me I was going into the degree of the unemployed. And I knew that when I was going in, and currently I am a self-employed artist. So I don't know if I've really proved them wrong yet. But it definitely did shape my experience. It also, I think, being a part of the department gave me a lot of confidence in ways that I might not have had in other areas. I accidentally started selling my art because I can't do anything halfway, and someone pointed out that I'm like a woman non-binary business owner at the moment. And I didn't even think about that when I was doing it. I was just kind of following a lot of doctrines that I had kind of accepted along the way. So I'm not currently employed. I'm going to step back on that part of the question, but it definitely did impact my experience at Penn. Hi.
So for me, yeah, I was an intern at Wharton. So I was doing work study. So that was definitely, you know, I guess having the mentality of the pre-professionalism. And I worked for a professor doing some employment discrimination, like research work. And I, like I said, I had a concentration in Wharton, and I had this fantasy at the time that I was going to go to law school and business school and sort of change the way nonprofits work, so that and sort of change, like, it didn't quite happen that way. I ended up just going to law school. It was hard enough just to get into law school. But then I got into a good law school. So in any event, but there was also, there was another big part of my college years that were very important to me. And I was in Penn dance. I'm a dancer. Sisters, my goodness, we gotta talk. So that was a huge part. I was dancing every day unless I was injured. That was one year, and I'm injured again, but not from dance this time. And so, but it's interesting, we talk about professionalism, and I vaguely remember there was a conversation I had with someone at the university about, you know, we're putting all this time into dancing and performing and taking classes. Why can't we get credit for that too? Like there are art classes, there are other, you know, performing arts or arts where I remember very clearly being told something to the effect of, well, dance is not professional. It was very striking to me. And then I ended up going to Northwestern for law school, where, you know, people are actors and actresses that become performers and dancers and stuff like that. It was just very striking. It was very interesting. And I just thought I'd throw that point in. Yeah, I think I will leave it there.
Penn's art culture takes itself very seriously.
Yes, but I did take a couple of art classes for fun, and they were fantastic, I have to say, because I like dabbling in that too.
I think the pre-professional culture was something I was sort of vaguely aware of during my time at Penn, but didn't really affect me directly. But it does make me think of, as I was kind of going through school, I didn't plan to go into the academic field. I knew I wanted to do something else. But I remember when I was graduating, the Affordable Care Act hadn't been passed. So there was not at that time any protection for you can stay on your family's health plan after school. And I have some chronic health problems. And so I just remember having this singular focus of as soon as possible when I'm done school, I need to find myself a full-time job that will give me health insurance. And that was like the one aim that I had, was like not go bankrupt if I have to go to the ER for heart problems. And so that did feel like it narrowed my options quite a bit, like wanting to go into the publishing industry. Those jobs generally start out as like unpaid internships or really low paid with like minimal benefits. It's very hard to survive in New York on the salary that most of those jobs are paying. And so, yeah, I felt like I did eventually find a way into it and make it work for myself. But I just remember that being like so much the focus. And I think also, one of the most important things that I got involved with was actually a work study job. I took advantage of the work study program that allowed for students to work at local nonprofits, but get paid by the university. So while I was in school, I was working as the volunteer programs coordinator for Neighborhood Bike Works, which I think is still in the basement of a building around like 40th and Locust on Penn's campus. And so that actually had a huge impact on my career, because I've ended up doing a lot of like human resources stuff that like I felt like I started building those skills through that job from just running volunteer programs and internships. And it really, I think it was so mutually beneficial, because I got to get this work experience that I needed, and also the organization got to have a part-time employee who was paid by Penn. So yeah, I think that was really beneficial to me.
Yeah, I think similar to what other folks have said, once I had that confidence to really fully pursue the major, I would see the campus recruiting, but, wasn't for me at the time. Later got my MBA, but was not interested in that at all. As an undergrad, I was very involved in the clubs. And like I said, I was on the track team. So I think knowing a lot of people that were, doing nursing or pre-med or, not necessarily corporate, and we're thinking about other types of degrees. My first job out of graduating was a research job, which obviously my research and academic work prepared me for. So I think that one of the harder things though is when you're graduating, your friends that are more pre-professional, knew what they were doing. I didn't find a job till a little bit after graduating. So I think that, being passionate about the major, fully going into it and committing to this type of work, or having these interests might mean that you sort of wait a little bit more. So that's how I feel like it affected me the most is, I saw the pre-professional folks out there and maybe they had an idea of what they wanted, but I knew at that time that that really wasn't a fit for me.
Definitely good to hear that the pre-professionalism was here when you all were here too. It's alive and well. Thank you all for sharing about your experiences. And I feel like that's part of our experience and how we determine what extracurriculars and what internships or jobs that we might be interested in later on. So now comes the all-important question that every first-year student asks me when they find out I'm a GSWS major. And I'm sure all of your responses will be very interesting, since amongst we have consultants, a lawyer, an artist, and someone in book selling, all these different industries. In what ways do you feel that your degree in GSWS helped you land a job post-graduation? And did the degree to continue to further your career progression while you were in the workforce or applying for graduate/professional programs? And we can start in the middle. Serena.
You chose the unemployed person to answer.
I'm
going to
applying for positions.
Yeah, you're right. I am going to think about applications to grad school, I guess, for this question. Again, like I said, I was part of the gender studies program as a freshman my fall. And then I started doing a bunch of different clubs that I was really passionate about. And then it wasn't until around the pandemic that I realized all those clubs had like quite heavy themes and could actually lead me towards a master's in social work. I grew up in a family, like a very DC family in politics, and I did not know any social workers until I came to Penn. And I didn't realize that the things that were making me really happy to work on campus were also things that I could kind of dedicate my life towards. So that's the direction I'm hoping to go towards. The goal is to become a therapist specializing in gender affirming care. So a lot of different things that I experienced on Penn's campus, especially during the pandemic. My queer family was was having a really hard time. Everyone was being sent home to kind of go back into the closet. And it made me realize a lot of different things about where I wanted to exist in that space. And kind of puzzle pieces were put together, partially because of the gender studies program.
So for me, I'm gonna go back to my senior year with Demi again, Demi Kurz, and I think that doing that senior thesis and having to, like, with the preparation for the work, but also there was this piece where I had to present at the end. And that was very new for me. There was a special type of presentation, and I remember being very anxious about it, but then preparing, and when I did it, it was like this incredible feeling and experience and empowering. It really stuck with me, and it felt like, oh, okay. And at the same time, so when I was graduating, I knew I wanted to go to law school, but I was rejected from every law school I applied to, partly because I applied to like a lot of the top schools, and I only applied to the top schools, but I was determined to go. And I've had a few brothers at Northwestern, and I knew that they, I just thought that I could possibly talk my way into getting on a wait list. I was feeling more comfortable speaking and advocating, and my older brother was very encouraging. And this is where gender and the way that I think we're socialized, including in my own family, because I definitely feel like my family was very patriarchal. I have 4 brothers, and I have a younger sister, but she was like one of the boys. And so I was one, and it was that was the household I grew up in. It was very much resembling our society. And so, but he was socialized to like just go after it. So he coached me. And what happened was I did really well at Penn, and I ended up getting getting into Phi Beta Kappa. And then I just felt like the reason why I didn't get in, I knew it was because of my standardized test scores. Like, I have never done well except one test when I got into Bronx High School of Science. Somehow I passed that test, but every other one. So I knew that was the reason. And so what I did was I was rejected before I was in Phi Beta Kappa, before my final grades came in. So my brother and I came up with this theory that let me just like ask for reconsideration from well, I did that at Northwestern, and I talked to the dean of admissions, and I was able to talk my way onto the wait list. So then, and this was back when they weren't interviewing students in person. So I said, well, I would love to meet you, and I figured to get an in-person meeting, then you could really win them over. So that's what I did. And I ended up getting, I talked my way into law school. And I did well. I ended up graduating with honors, but and yeah, so it's kind of a cool thing. But I feel like my senior year set the stage for that. And then also I just want to speak a little briefly about the content, the women's studies, the African American studies, sociology classes, urban studies classes. I mean, all that has stayed with me. All that has been a huge part of the way I think, the way I breathe, the way I live. And it's just part of who I am and the way I see the world, when, talking about how people are all these different layers. And for me also, all the social justice work I've wanted to do, through the law is both individual level, direct representation, as well as systemic work, policy work, looking at people and the systems from, all these different angles, and recognizing that you know, people can bring different privileges, but also have been marginalized or oppressed in different ways, and recognizing that, but also recognizing that that's not who they are. They are who they're all, everyone is individual at the end of the day. And so I brought that to every job that I've had. And I think that's really stayed with me throughout my career.
Yeah, I definitely feel the same. I think like for me, the thesis class and getting to engage in that kind of like really like rigorous work and the requirement to take at least at the time that I graduated, there was, I think it was a required like qualitative or quantitative research methods course. And I took one on like sociological research. And I think like the ability to kind of take some stuff that was more on that side of things, whereas like the stuff I more naturally like gravitated to was often like in the English or like film studies department. But just that, again, interdisciplinary nature of the program and the encouragement and requirement to focus on research methodology and like understand that was hugely helpful to me in my career. I spent about 5 years working for an organization called the Book Industry Study Group as like an industry trends researcher, looking at like the size of the book industry, consumer reading habits, and stuff like that. And I think if I hadn't had that background in those things, I don't know if I would have been able to do that job to the level that I was. And I think like the expertise about the industry that I was able to build through that opened a lot of other doors for me. So yeah, I definitely think both in terms of those kind of like solid skills that I was able to develop and just the, like I said earlier, kind of the understanding of like myself and the world that came out of those classes was huge. Without that, I don't think I could have done anything.
Yeah, so if this is a sales pitch for the gender studies major and the type of things we got to study at Penn, I'm so passionate about it. As I mentioned, my first job out of undergrad was working in research. I worked at the Children's Hospital of Philadelphia in the adolescent HIV clinic, and the patient populations there, is very diverse in terms of race, ethnicity, class, and most tend to be in the LGBTQ plus community. So my academic background and then my involvement in Penn's campus as a queer woman, being part of the Queer Student Alliance and Penn Athletes and Allies Tackling Homophobia and Transphobia, those sorts of things, and the experience at the major helped me land that job for sure. And then my next job was with Pennsylvania's first openly gay state legislator, Representative Brian Sims. He's a former state rep in Pennsylvania. I know that my major helped me get that job, due to the expertise that I got and the academic and professional work. Got to help with non-discrimination legislation. And then my job after that was with an organization called You Can Play, which is LGBTQ plus athletes, supporting them, and required a lot of, educational background in the topics that we have in GSWS. So definitely super important in my, first 3 jobs out of college. And then I think really, even in terms of my MBA, I think having that background and saying like, I'm coming to this from a different perspective, not that corporate perspective. I want to understand the corporate perspective. I'm interested in consulting, but I think that definitely set me apart. I really think that, again, the path might not be as clear for us in this major as some other folks who go the more traditional pre-professional routes, but definitely have used it, and I use it, on a day-to-day basis. So definitely love the question, and thanks so much for asking. I think, George, you're up.
So I too went to business school and got an MBA. And I don't think I would have gotten into business school had I not done this major. I remember following one of the interviews from one of the schools. It was a UVA Darden. The admissions officer called me and she's like, George, I mean, you were a gender, sexuality, and women's studies major. You became a teacher, and now you want to go to business school. Like, how does that make sense? But she was like, but we love that you're bringing that perspective because we don't always see that all the time in our application pool. And so I kind of felt like that was something really unique that I would be able to offer to the business school community. And then now like the business community, I think in consulting, specifically doing diversity, equity, and inclusion consulting, it's a tough space, especially now. But I think having been a part of this major, I'm able to call a thing a thing. And I think there are many folks that I've come across in this space where folks are still afraid to say Black, and I'm like, I'm a Black man. It's okay. And I think being able to approach problems with this type of lens, it allows me to approach the work with vulnerability that I think helps build relationships with other people. And I think in the DEI space specifically, it allows me to also just have a sense of credibility in terms of thinking about other communities, thinking about the voices who are not in the room when we're trying to solve for problems. So I think it just is a unique value add for consulting.
Y'all, I think that the new like slogan or like selling point for the GSWS major should be like, you can now talk your way into law school. Like, that's my suggestion. Thank you all for sharing. My next question is like really similar. So you can kind of take it in a new or different direction if you are interested. But since this is kind of about like your progression as an alumni, I wanted to make sure that we had time to talk about like y'all's careers. So I'm really curious about like the day-to-day of your current position and its relationality to how your background in GSWS has helped you to succeed. So I know a couple of you touched on that a little bit, but if you could touch on it more, that would be great. And if you could speak on, if you are interested, you can speak on like current or past positions that you've had. And we can start with Nadine.
So in my current position, I'm the VP of Ops at Bookshop. I think a lot of the like background that I have from this program, I think affects the day to day, but I think especially like what comes to mind for me is a couple special initiatives that we've been working on. So like being in the book industry, one of the major challenges we're facing as an industry right now is book bans, and especially attacks on like queer and trans literature. And so Bookshop has been able to get involved in a few initiatives fighting back against book bans. We're actually doing a partnership right now with Banned Books USA that allows anyone in Florida for the cost of shipping to have banned books sent to them. And Bookshop handles the fulfillment side of that partnership. And it's like a pilot program right now. So if that shows success, we're going to continue to expand it in Texas and Missouri, or like the next states will probably bring that too. But I think like it's just really valuable to me to work for an organization that like really like I don't know how to put this exactly, but like I think when I first heard of Bookshop, I was a little bit skeptical. Like I'm like, oh, somebody's going to come make like an e-commerce site for independent bookstores and then steal their customers and then like get sold to Amazon or whatever. But it's actually like even written into the bylaws of the company that we can never be sold to Amazon or any other major retailer, which basically makes it impossible for us to get funding from a lot of sources who might otherwise want to give it to us. But you know, I think like our values really are evident in everything that the company does, and being able to work somewhere where it's just like a no-brainer to be like, of course we want to send banned books to Florida. Like that's not going to be a debate internally. Like obviously we want to do that is great. And I feel like I'm really able to bring my own perspective to the organization and know that it will be valued, and getting to be like a non-binary person who's like on the executive team for this company means a lot to me. And I think also, I guess the other place I'm thinking that it touches on probably the most is we do also make like a special effort to try to support bookstores owned or founded by like marginalized community members. So if you go on Bookshop, you can easily look up like what are the Black owned bookstores in my community or who I can order from around the country. And I think like I hope that we can make it more and more possible for folks from those communities to open their own bookstores. I think like right now we've seen a lot of progress, but bookselling kind of mostly remains a really challenged and not particularly sustainable business. A lot of people actually working on the floor in bookstores are being, you know, they're not paid a living wage. They have meager, if any, benefits. So I'm hopeful that we can like continue to support those businesses and then eventually get them to a place where bookselling can be the career that it should be, because it really requires a lot of like special skills and knowledge, even if you're just someone who like works on the floor of your local bookstore. I don't know if that really answers your question, but those are the kind of things that came to mind for me.
Can we turn to Anna next? I feel like you tend to be, you know, let's skip around a little. Yeah. If that's okay with you.
Are you making my picture bigger? Is that what's happening? I'm like, okay, it's good. It's good small. It's good small, good big. I'm good with whatever. But so the question, just so I make sure Lex that I'm getting this right, it's just about how we're using the gender studies major, the GSWS major in our professional careers currently, right?
Yeah, skills you learned while you were here.
Yes. Okay, awesome. Yeah, I think that so currently also a consultant at Vynamic, and Vynamic is a healthcare specific company based out of Philly, actually. So I'm down there from New York quite a bit. I think that, you know, even though I've gotten to do a lot of diversity, equity, inclusion projects, culture focused projects that relate directly to the skills and academic research and background that I have from the major, I think that, you know, you really can apply these concepts to really any kind of project. And as consultants, we're often thrown into problems that we've never learned about before, right? Or that necessarily aren't in our interests. So for instance, I got on a long-term project a couple of years ago for a car company. And this was when I was at Deloitte, and it was a technology project. And, you know, from, you know, face value, it didn't necessarily have like a gender studies component, but I really think that you can apply that kind of intersectionality, that perspective taking, the understanding diverse voices, and really bringing that into whatever you're doing. So the project originally was supposed to be just in the United States, and it was actually became a more global project. So one of the things that I sort of took on was really saying, okay, now that we're in Europe, now that we're in Latin America, now that we're in different regions, you know, how are these communities being affected by this technology change, right? Sounds like, again, not something to do with our major, but I really think that you're able to take those skills and apply them and see things that maybe people aren't picking up on, right? Like, do you have enough materials in different languages? Are you aware of different cultural differences and how things will be received? So really the smallest things that, you know, we're kind of trained to pick up on in terms of the diverse voices and in terms of different cultures and different norms were really critical for that job and that role. And it's something that I continue to do on each of my projects.
One of the things that I think about in terms of skills from GSWS, I would say is actually like storytelling and like the importance of storytelling. One of the things that I'm working on right now, outside of my client-facing work, is writing a paper on the experiences of chief DEI officers. And there were a few publications last summer that came out. One that said that the majority of chief DEI officers are white men. Another in Wall Street Journal said that chief DEI officers are unqualified minorities. And yeah, I hear the reactions. And this paper that I'm writing right now is a counter narrative to all of that. We sent out a survey to many of our clients, many of them Fortune 500 leaders, that found that probably not to be shocking, most chief DI officers are women, specifically women of color. And I think when there are false narratives out in the market, we have poor solutions, right? Because they're not tailored to what actual problem needs to be solved. And so I think part of my work and skills that I want to apply is just making sure that whatever we put out there is accurate and true. So whatever recommendations or solutions we come up with can be tailored to the communities that really, really need them. Especially when we're thinking about women and women of color being chief DI officers, they're also the ones who are usually bearing the burden of a lot of these issues around inequities in companies. And so to bear the burden and have a false narrative out there, I think is really complicated, but I think this major helps me, work with a lens to be able to unpack some of those myths, if you will.
In addition to painting right now, I'm also a hotline staff backup for WAR, the Philly Rape Crisis Center. And I consistently get calls from trans clients, houseless clients, various different communities. And I was really uncomfortable with the training that we received. Initially, I've been volunteering with them for 4 years, and it's been a while, but I knew that there were some callers that weren't getting the support that they needed. And so I went to my supervisor and we talked about some changes that could be made, some refreshers that needed to be given to the volunteers that were taking these calls. It's a blessing and a curse, but I see the things I learned in these classes everywhere I go. And it's also a really important skill that a lot of people don't necessarily have or don't implement. Seems slightly unrelated, but again, I'm painting, and the painting that I'm most proud of in my entire life was a final for a class that I did for a gender studies class. It's just something that you can apply to anything, and a lot of people aren't able or aren't willing to do that. So regardless of whatever career I end up on, I have faith that I will take that with me regardless.
So, gosh, there's always so much I could say. I think one of the big things that I want to say about what I learned was, certainly being aware of so many different inequities, disparities by race, class, gender, sexuality, so many different aspects, immigration status, disability status, like you name it. And my work has been throughout the past 22 years after law school, and even during, was really addressing these disparities, working at different ways and on both an individual basis and systemic basis to address the disparities and see the disparities and get the information out there. Write reports, and then not just write the reports with recommendations, but do the work over and over and over and over again to get the funding, get the resources to implement those recommendations. And it's been really wild ride to see that. Just very first, I have to talk about my first post-law school experience was working at the ACLU in the Reproductive Freedom Project. And that was an incredible experience, but it just is so incredibly painful to think about how, the work I was doing back then, it was just, it was a given that so many women had so many rights, which, I don't want to say people took for granted, but my job then was focusing on low-income women and also young people, adolescents, low-income women, doing class actions and talking to individual plaintiffs of women who, poor, Black, brown, who did not have access to the same kind of care that so many, more privileged women have had based on federal laws that were saying that, oh, they didn't have a right to this kind of care through Medicaid, which was horrifying. There's Hyde Amendment that Anyway, don't get me started on the law. And yes, the law can be very frustrating. And then also working with young people. And I want to bring this up because I was also doing a lot of work training lawyers in different states where teenagers, the laws are such that they would have to go before a judge if they can't get parental consent to get in a certain reproductive health care, including abortion if they wanted that. And of course, way back then, we didn't have the same tools in terms of the pills as well, like, and being able to more easily get access to, you know, different types of ways to maintain your reproductive health care. But so I was doing all these trainings for lawyers in different states. And I want to bring that up now because I'm doing work now where, and for several years where I've been at different nonprofit organizations doing education rights work. And, you know, and for low-income children, in particular, focusing on those who are court involved, those who have behavioral, mental health, emotional challenges, those who face school discipline and all this, you know, disproportionately and are pushed out of school. And I have my first client at my new job who is pregnant and parenting and is struggling to just get her educational needs met, you know? And so there's so many layers to it where, okay, she's in a state where maybe, you know, she can get more, you know, reproductive health care access, but in terms of education, you know, really certain, you know, she has rights, but reminding people and advocating and getting what she needs. And then I also do have a lot of young adult males and boys, particularly it's almost all Black and brown in New York City and in many other places who are you know, facing police disproportionately, who are arrested disproportionately. And the child welfare system, you know, it's not a welfare system. It is a regulation system, as we know, and working on an individual and a systemic basis to try to change that. And so there's so much work to be done, but I do see, so, you know, it's just so ingrained in me. I think so much of the studies and whoops. I thought I turned my phone off. Apparently, you know, we did. We talked about this happening.
She
And
tried.
I did try, but I failed. I apologize. So, but there are so many different ways that I feel like my education has helped. And I have to say one last thing. We're coming full circle here, and I know time is that the other thing is my path throughout my career has been, someone could say, all over the place too. Like, okay, you worked at the ACLU. Okay, you worked at the New York Civil Liberties Union after that. But then you did public defense work. Then you went to government and did consumer protection work. But I think part of what I learned at Penn also was, you know, do what you feel is right and your next move. And it doesn't matter what other people think. And it may not make sense to other people, but it does make sense to some other people because you are getting the offers, you are getting hired, and there's no there, and there, you know, and there are ways to really bring together I think the diversity of skills and opportunities and experiences that you've had to be able to make it your own and make an impact.
Thank you all so much for those responses. Thank you all for being here today.